There is a company most people have never heard of. It advises governments. It built the software that runs the global financial system. And it manages more money than any entity in human history. $14 trillion. That number is almost impossible to understand. So let's make it real. The entire GDP of China, the world's second largest economy, is $18 trillion. BlackRock manages 14 as a single private company. The story begins in 1988. Larry Fink is a 35-year-old bond trader at First Boston. He's already legendary on Wall Street. He helped invent the mortgage-backed security, the same financial instrument that would later trigger the 2008 global collapse. But in 1988, he sees something his competitors don't. Risk. Not just the risk of losing money, the risk of not understanding what you own. Fink believed that most investors, including the largest institutions on Earth, had no real idea what was inside their portfolios. They were flying blind. So he built a solution. Fink co-founded BlackRock from a single room inside the Blackstone Group's offices in New York. 8 founding partners, one idea: use technology and data to manage risk better than anyone else alive. In its first year, BlackRock managed under $300 million. By 1995, $69 billion. Today, $14 trillion, a 19% compound annual growth rate, sustained for 37 years. That is not luck, that is a system. To understand BlackRock's power, you need to understand its real product. It is not a fund. It is not a bank. It is a machine. BlackRock built a software system called Aladdin, Asset, Liability, Debt and Derivative Investment Network. Aladdin runs continuously on thousands of servers. It analyzes risk across every asset class, every market, every currency on Earth. Every single day, it runs over 5,000 computer simulations. It monitors inflation, currency shifts, geopolitical events, and credit risk simultaneously. Here is where this becomes extraordinary. BlackRock does not keep Aladdin to itself. It sells access. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, other banks. They all pay BlackRock to run their portfolios through Aladdin. As of 2025, $25 trillion in assets are managed on the Aladdin platform. That is 7 to 8% of the entire global financial system running through one company's software. Think about what that means. When Aladdin says a portfolio is too exposed to European debt, dozens of institutions across dozens of countries receive the same signal. They make the same moves at the same time. One system, steering the world's capital. BlackRock is the largest shareholder in more companies than you can count. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, ExxonMobil, JP Morgan. Across almost every major index in almost every country, BlackRock is at the top. How is this possible? The answer is index funds. When you buy an S&P 500 index fund, your money is used to purchase small stakes in every company in that index. BlackRock, through its iShares brand, runs the largest ETF business in the world. Hundreds of millions of ordinary people invest in iShares. Their combined capital gives BlackRock a controlling stake across the entire economy. Together with Vanguard and State Street, these 3 firms control roughly 80% of all indexed assets. They are the largest shareholders in each other. They vote on corporate boards. They set environmental and governance standards. They decide which companies receive capital and which don't. This is not conspiracy. This is a structural reality of how modern capital works, built legally, deliberately, over decades. In March 2020, the global economy was collapsing. COVID had triggered the fastest market crash in history. The Federal Reserve needed to act, and it needed to act immediately. It turned to BlackRock. The US government hired BlackRock to manage 3 emergency bond buying programs. BlackRock was given authority to purchase bonds on behalf of the Federal Reserve, including bonds issued by BlackRock's own ETFs. This is not an allegation, it is documented public record. The European Central Bank similarly hired BlackRock to advise on its stimulus programs. The governments of Canada and Ukraine have done the same. Larry Fink, BlackRock's CEO, has been called the most powerful man in finance. World leaders seek his counsel. He attends Davos annually. His annual letter to CEOs is treated as policy guidance, not law, but something that functions like law. BlackRock sits at a unique intersection. Too embedded to be ignored. Too large to be regulated like an ordinary firm. Too interconnected to fail. BlackRock did not seize power. It was handed power, gradually, transaction by transaction, by a financial system that rewarded scale above all else. Every pension fund that outsourced its risk management to Aladdin. Every ordinary investor who bought an iShares ETF. Every government that called Larry Fink when the economy was on fire. They all chose BlackRock. To truly understand BlackRock's relationship with the government, we have to go back to the wreckage of 2008. When the housing bubble burst, the global financial system stood on the brink of total collapse. The US Treasury and the Federal Reserve were desperate. They had trillions in toxic assets to manage and no way to analyze them. They turned to the one man who had been obsessed with risk since 1988, Larry Fink. The government hired BlackRock to manage the multi-billion-dollar Maiden Lane portfolios. These were the toxic leftovers of Bear Stearns and AIG. They turned to the one man who had been obsessed with risk since 1988, Larry Fink. This moment cemented BlackRock's position. They weren't just a company anymore. They were infrastructure, the only entity with the technical capacity to save the system. And in saving it, they became its most powerful gatekeeper. There is one asset class where BlackRock's presence is felt most personally: real estate. For decades, the American dream was built on individual home ownership. But after 2008, the landscape shifted. By 2021, institutional investors were accounting for nearly 1 in every 4 home purchases in the United States. By 2021, institutional investors were accounting for nearly 1 in every 4 home purchases in the United States. This wasn't just about owning land. It was about the securitization of the American home, turning a human need into a high-yield asset class. The result? Skyrocketing prices, fewer first-time buyers, and a generation of renters. BlackRock argues they are providing much-needed liquidity and professional management to the housing market. Critics argue they are pricing out the middle class. Either way, the impact is undeniable. Your landlord might not be a person, it might be a platform. BlackRock's influence isn't just about the past or present, it's about defining the future. In 2020, Larry Fink issued his most famous letter yet, a call for a fundamental reshaping of finance: sustainability. Climate risk is investment risk. This was the birth of BlackRock's aggressive push into ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards. By using its massive voting power, BlackRock can force companies to change their business models. They demand lower carbon emissions and more diverse boards. For some, this is corporate responsibility at its peak. For others, it is woke capitalism, an unelected entity imposing its political will. Regardless of the politics, the power is real. When BlackRock votes, the world's boardrooms listen. They are writing the rules for the 21st century economy. From the Oval Office to the server rooms, BlackRock is the silent connective tissue between states, corporations, and citizens. Their software runs the system. Their capital fuels the corporations. Their advice steers the leaders, the company most people have never heard of. Because in a world of complex, interconnected risk, BlackRock has become the only one who can see the whole board. And the one who sees the board usually wins the game. Because it was the best option available. And that is the most important thing to understand about systems of power. They are rarely built through force. They are built through convenience. This is Sovereign. Subscribe if you want to understand how the world actually works.